The piercing scream echoed through the marble hall of the National History Museum, bouncing off dinosaur bones and crystalline displays. 7-year-old Noah Matthews thrashed in the grip of two uniformed officers, his small body contorting as they lifted him from the ground. His face, flushed crimson with tears and terror, contorted in a silent howl before another wail erupted. The sound was raw, primal, a child in distress. "Please stop. He doesn't understand." Rachel Matthews lunged forward, her hands outstretched toward her son. An officer's arm shot out, blocking her path. Behind her, Michael Matthews struggled against a third officer, his voice cracking. "He's autistic. This is traumatizing him. Please, just let us take him outside ourselves." Through the gathering crowd of shocked museum-goers, a woman in a crisp blue blazer with the museum logo stood with arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line of satisfaction. Her museum tour guide badge read, "Catherine Wellington, Senior Guide." She nodded approvingly as Noah was carried toward the exit, his screams growing more desperate with each step. "I warned them," she muttered to a wide-eyed colleague. "We can't have disruptions like that in here. Rules are rules." Noah's sneakers kicked helplessly in the air, one flying off to land beside a prehistoric display. As the officers pushed through the heavy glass doors to the outside world, the boy's cries faded into the afternoon air, leaving behind a stunned silence and a single small shoe. 3 hours earlier, the Matthews family had arrived at the museum's grand entrance steps, Noah bouncing with excitement between his parents. The National History Museum's dinosaur exhibition had been all he'd talked about for weeks. His backpack, decorated with pterodactyls and T-Rexes, bounced against his shoulders as he hopped from one step to another. "Remember what we practiced, buddy." Michael knelt to Noah's level, gently placing hands on his son's shoulders to center him. "When we get too excited, we take 3 deep breaths and squeeze my stress ball." Noah finished, already pulling a squishy blue dinosaur from his pocket. He demonstrated, inhaling deeply, his chest rising dramatically before exhaling. After 3 breaths, he looked expectantly at his father. "I did it! Can we see the big T-Rex now?" Rachel smiled, adjusting the lanyard around Noah's neck. The medical alert card dangled prominently, displaying information about his autism and sensory processing disorder. It was a precaution they'd learned to take after previous public outings had led to misunderstandings. "Absolutely. And remember, if things get too loud or bright, I put on my headphones and find my safe space with you or Daddy," Noah recited, already reaching for his father's hand, impatience evident in the subtle bounce of his heels. The family approached the ticket counter, where Michael explained Noah's condition to the attendant. "We might need a quiet space if things get overwhelming. Is there somewhere we could go if needed?" The young ticket collector nodded sympathetically. "Of course, sir. We have a sensory room on the 2nd floor, and all our staff are trained for accessibility needs." He handed them a map with the quiet spaces clearly marked. As they moved through the entrance hall, Noah's eyes widened at the massive skeleton dominating the space. Dad, it's a diplodocus," he exclaimed, his voice rising with excitement. "Did you know they were over 80 feet long? That's like 4 school buses." A nearby tour guide, Catherine Wellington, glanced sharply in their direction, her guided group momentarily distracted by Noah's enthusiasm. She cleared her throat pointedly before continuing her rehearsed speech about the Mesozoic era. Rachel caught the look and gently guided Noah to the side. "Remember, buddy," museum voice, "there are other people learning too." Noah nodded, pressing his lips together in concentration as he lowered his voice to a whisper that was still audibly excited. "But Mom, They had tiny brains the size of a ping-pong ball, even though they were so big. The family moved through the exhibition halls, Noah's excitement growing with each display. At the prehistoric mammals, he spent 15 minutes explaining the differences between woolly mammoths and mastodons to a delighted toddler and her mother. In the Ocean Life Hall, he pressed his face against the glass cases of ancient fish fossils, his breath fogging the surface as he counted the vertebrae out loud. For the most part, the morning passed peacefully. Noah occasionally flapped his hands when particularly excited, or hummed a self-soothing pattern when the crowds grew too dense. But these stims were subtle, noticeable only to those looking for them. Michael and Rachel had developed an almost choreographed approach to public outings, trading off supervision and ensuring Noah had regular breaks. Just before noon, they entered the museum's crown jewel, the Dinosaur Hall. Noah froze in the doorway, his mouth falling open as he took in the massive Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton that dominated the center of the room. His fingers began to tremble, and he grabbed his father's hand, squeezing tightly. "You okay, champ?" Michael asked quietly. Noah nodded vigorously. It's really here. It's really real." His voice was breathless with awe. Rachel checked her watch. "Perfect timing, too. There's a guided tour of this exhibit starting in 5 minutes. Want to join?" The family positioned themselves near the gathering group, Noah sandwiched protectively between his parents. When the tour guide approached, Rachel's heart sank slightly. It was the same woman who had given them the pointed look earlier, Catherine Wellington, according to her name tag. Her gaze swept over the assembled group, lingering momentarily on Noah before she began her introduction. "Welcome to the Prehistoric Predators exhibition. I'm Catherine, your senior guide today. This tour will last approximately 45 minutes, during which I ask that you remain quiet, stay with the group, and save questions for the designated times." Her eyes again flicked toward Noah. "This is a scientific space that requires appropriate behavior." As Catherine led them through the exhibition, Noah listened raptly, occasionally whispering facts to his parents that the guide hadn't mentioned. When they reached the Velociraptor display, Catherine was explaining their hunting patterns when Noah raised his hand, bouncing slightly on his toes. Catherine pointedly ignored him, continuing her prepared speech, but Noah's hand remained steadfastly in the air. After several moments, an elderly man in the group gently prompted, "I think the young man has something to add." With an irritated glance, Catherine paused. "Yes, quickly, please. We have a schedule." Actually, velociraptors were much smaller than this, Noah said, his words tumbling out rapidly. They were only about the size of a turkey, and they had feathers. This model is based on Deinonychus, which was bigger. The movie Jurassic Park got it wrong, and... "That's enough," Catherine cut him off sharply. "I'm the expert here. If you can't respect the tour rules, perhaps you should move along." Noah's face fell, his excitement crumbling as he stepped back against his mother. Rachel felt anger flare in her chest, but kept her voice measured. "He's actually correct about the size and feathers. Current paleontology supports that." Catherine's nostrils flared. "Ma'am, I have conducted this tour for 15 years. I don't need corrections from..." Her gaze flicked dismissively to Noah. "Amateur enthusiasts." Several group members shifted uncomfortably. Michael placed a protective hand on Noah's shoulder. "Come on, buddy. Let's explore on our own." They separated from the tour. Noah's earlier excitement diminished, but not extinguished. As they approached the massive T-Rex skeleton again, he began sharing facts about its binocular vision and powerful jaw strength. His voice, naturally modulated louder than typical due to his processing differences, carried through the vaulted ceiling of the exhibition hall. From across the room, Catherine's tour group had paused beneath a Triceratops display. Her gaze repeatedly darted toward Noah, her jaw tensing with each enthusiastic explanation he gave his parents. When Noah let out a delighted gasp at discovering a fossil tooth in a display case, knocking his elbow against the protective glass in excitement, Catherine excused herself from her group and marched purposefully across the hall. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice clipped as she approached the Matthews family. "You're disrupting the entire exhibition. I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voices immediately or leave the premises." Rachel placed herself slightly in front of Noah. "He's autistic and excited about dinosaurs. He's not being disruptive. He's engaging with the exhibition exactly as a child should." "This isn't a playground," Catherine replied coldly. "This is a place of learning and research. If your child can't behave appropriately, you shouldn't have brought him." Michael stepped forward. "What exactly is inappropriate about his behavior? He's not touching the exhibits. He's sharing factual information. He's not running or shouting." "He is too loud," Catherine insisted, her voice rising ironically above Noah's in volume. "And that stimming behavior is distracting other visitors." Noah, sensing the tension, began to rock slightly, his hands moving to his ears as the confrontation escalated. The stress ball emerged from his pocket, his fingers working it anxiously. "He's self-regulating," Rachel explained, trying to keep her voice calm for Noah's benefit. "And stimming isn't a bad word. It's how he processes sensory information." Catherine's eyes narrowed at the stress ball. "No food or drinks in the exhibition hall." "It's not. It's a stress relief toy," Michael explained, frustration evident in his tightening jaw. "Props aren't allowed either." Catherine held out her hand expectantly toward Noah. "I'll need to confiscate that." Noah clutched the dinosaur-shaped stress ball tighter, his breathing becoming more rapid. "No, please. I need it when I'm scared." "Rules are rules," Catherine insisted, stepping closer and reaching for the toy. Noah backed away, bumping into a rope barrier. As Catherine advanced, he became increasingly agitated, his breathing shallow and quick. "No touching. No touching," he repeated, a phrase his parents recognized as a sign he was approaching sensory overload. "Ma'am, please back up," Rachel urged, moving to create space between Catherine and her son. "He needs a moment to regulate. You're making things worse." But Catherine had already reached for the stress ball, her fingers closing around it while Noah still held on. "Let go," she demanded. The sudden tug-of-war was too much. Noah's carefully maintained composure shattered. He let out a distressed vocalization, not a scream, but a deep, guttural sound that helped him process overwhelming stimuli. His body tensed as he entered sensory overload, hands flapping rapidly at his sides after releasing the ball. Catherine stumbled backward, clutching the stress toy and staring at Noah as though he'd transformed into one of the prehistoric creatures around them. Without another word, she turned sharply and marched toward a staff door, disappearing inside. Michael immediately knelt beside Noah, who had slid to the floor, hands over his ears. "Deep breaths, buddy. We're going to go to a quiet space now." "Okay." Rachel consulted the museum map, locating the nearest sensory room. "It's just one floor up. Can you walk?" "Noah. Or should Dad carry you?" Noah rocked gently, self-soothing as best he could. "Walk. I can walk." he managed, though his voice was strained. The family moved slowly toward the exit of the dinosaur hall, Michael and Rachel flanking their son protectively as curious and concerned glances followed them. They had nearly reached the door when Catherine reappeared this time, accompanied by 2 security guards and a woman in a museum administrator blazer. "That's them," Catherine said, pointing accusingly. The boy was having a tantrum and disrupting the entire museum experience for everyone else. The administrator stepped forward, her expression caught between professional neutrality and discomfort. "I'm Linda Parsons, Guest Relations Manager. We've received complaints about disruptive behavior. Perhaps it would be best if you visited another day when—" She paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. "When your son is feeling more composed." Rachel felt her patience evaporating. "He's autistic, not misbehaving. Your guide confiscated his sensory tool and triggered an overload. We're heading to your sensory room now, which your ticketing staff assured us was available." Linda looked momentarily taken aback, her eyes dropping to Noah's medical alert lanyard. "I see. Well, yes. We do have accommodation spaces. Kevin can escort you there." She nodded to one of the security guards. "This is ridiculous," Catherine interjected. "Special needs or not, there are standards of behavior. Other children manage to visit without disruptions." Noah, still recovering, caught the phrase special needs and looked up. "I'm not special needs," he said quietly but clearly. "I'm neurologically divergent. My brain works differently, not wrongly." Catherine scoffed. "Well, whatever terminology is politically correct this week, the point remains that—" "That's enough, Catherine," Linda cut in, finally registering the situation more clearly. "Please return to your tour group." For a moment, it seemed the confrontation had been diffused. The security guard named Kevin stepped forward with a more sympathetic expression. "The sensory room is this way, if you'd like to follow me." The Matthews family had taken only a few steps when the museum's main doors burst open and 3 police officers strode purposefully into the hall. They moved with the determined efficiency of responders to an urgent situation, hands positioned near equipment belts. The lead officer approached the nearest staff member, which happened to be Catherine, who immediately pointed toward Noah and his parents. "We received a 911 call about a disturbance," the officer stated, his gaze assessing Noah, who was still visibly distressed, though calmer. "Something about an uncontrolled individual threatening museum property and staff." Michael's expression shifted from confusion to horrified realization. "You called the police for a child having a sensory overload?" Catherine lifted her chin defensively. "I called because he was having a violent episode that was escalating. That's protocol for any threat in the museum." "Violent?" Rachel echoed incredulously. "He never touched anyone. He never damaged anything." The lead officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, please remain calm. We need to assess the situation." He turned to Catherine. "Can you describe what happened?" Before Catherine could respond, Linda stepped forward. "Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. The child is autistic and was having difficulty with sensory processing. We were just escorting the family to our accommodation room." Catherine's eyes flashed. "He was screaming and flailing. He could have hurt someone or damaged the exhibits. Some of these fossils are irreplaceable." "That's completely false," Michael said, struggling to keep his voice level. "Our son never—" "Sir, I need you to step back." One of the officers interrupted, moving closer to Michael. "We need to get statements from everyone involved." The commotion had drawn a crowd of museum visitors who watched with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Noah, overwhelmed by the increasing number of people and voices, began to rock more intensely, his hands returning to his ears as he hummed a self-soothing pattern. The officers exchanged glances, clearly unfamiliar with autism-stimming behaviors. One officer approached Noah directly, bending to his level. "Hey, buddy, I need you to calm down and stop that. Okay." "Please don't," Rachel warned, recognizing the danger signs. "He's self-regulating. Touching him right now will make things worse." But the officer had already placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. The unexpected touch from a stranger during sensory overload was too much. Noah reacted instinctively, jerking away with a distressed cry. The officer, interpreting the movement as resistance, immediately firmed his grip. "I need you to cooperate, son." Noah's fight-or-flight response activated fully. He began to struggle, not out of defiance but pure neurological overload. "No touch, no touch," he cried out. In seconds, the situation spiraled. The officers, trained to respond to resistance with control techniques, moved to restrain Noah. Michael lunged forward to protect his son, only to be intercepted by the third officer. Rachel's pleas were lost in the chaos, as Noah was lifted bodily from the ground, his sensory processing disorder transforming the experience into pure neurological torture. And so it was that 7-year-old Noah Matthews, dinosaur enthusiast and autistic child, found himself being carried from the National History Museum by police officers while his parents begged them to stop, all because a museum guide named Catherine Wellington decided his neurodivergence was a criminal disruption. Dr. Elena Sandoval had been enjoying her day off, wandering through the museum's new gem and mineral exhibition, when the commotion from the main hall drew her attention. As a child psychologist specializing in neurodevelopmental conditions, the sound of a child in distress triggered both her professional instincts and her human compassion. She arrived at the entrance just as the police were carrying Noah outside, his parents frantically following. Without hesitation, she pushed through the gathering crowd, her hospital ID still clipped to her purse from her morning rounds. "Excuse me, I'm a doctor," she called out, jogging down the museum steps after the group. "What's happening here?" The scene outside was heartbreaking. Noah had been set on his feet, but was being held firmly by one officer, while another kept his parents at a short distance. The boy had progressed from overload to complete shutdown, his body rigid, eyes unfocused, breathing shallow and rapid. "Are you with the family?" an officer asked Dr. Sandoval suspiciously. "No. I'm a child psychologist from City Children's Hospital, specialized in autism and neurodevelopmental conditions." She held up her hospital credentials. "And what I'm seeing is a child in acute sensory distress, not criminal behavior." Rachel seized on the unexpected alliance. "Please help him. He has autism and sensory processing disorder. This is traumatizing him." Dr. Sandoval approached cautiously, keeping her movements slow and predictable. "Officers, this child is having a neurological reaction, not a behavioral one. Restraint will only make his condition worse. May I approach him?" The officers exchanged uncertain glances before the senior officer nodded reluctantly. Dr. Sandoval knelt a few feet from Noah, careful not to crowd him. "Hi, Noah," she said softly. "My name is Dr. Elena. I can see you're having a really hard time right now. The lights are too bright out here, aren't they? And there are too many people and noises." Noah remained rigid, but his eyes flickered briefly toward her voice, a tiny acknowledgement. I work with lots of kids whose brains work like yours. She continued gently. Would it help if you could sit somewhere quieter with your parents? A small nod, almost imperceptible. Doctor, Sandoval turned to the officers. This child poses no threat to anyone. He's experiencing sensory overload, which is a physiological state triggered by his neurological differences. What he needs right now is a quiet environment and his parents' support, not police intervention. The lead officer frowned. We received a call about a violent disturbance, which was clearly mischaracterized. Dr. Sandoval interrupted firmly. As a medical professional, I'm telling you that continuing to detain this child constitutes harmful treatment of a disabled individual. Would you like me to call the hospital's legal department to explain that further? Her professional authority, combined with the growing crowd of concerned onlookers, many with phones recording the scene, finally penetrated. The officer holding Noah released his grip. Go to your parents, son, he said gruffly. Noah didn't move at first, still locked in his protective shutdown. Rachel approached slowly, speaking in the gentle tones of practiced maternal comfort. Noah, honey, you can come to me now. We're going to go somewhere quiet. When Noah finally stumbled into his mother's arms, burying his face against her shoulder, several onlookers wiped away tears. Michael joined them, creating a protective family circle, his face a storm of relief and lingering anger. Catherine Wellington chose that moment to emerge from the museum, accompanied by Linda Parsons. Is he being arrested? Catherine asked loudly. He was completely out of control in there. Dr. Sandoval turned sharply. Are you the person who called 911 on an autistic child? I called about a disturbance. Catherine defended. How was I supposed to know he was wearing a medical alert lanyard? Michael interrupted, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. We told you repeatedly he was autistic. You deliberately triggered a sensory overload by taking his stress management tool. Linda Parsons looked increasingly horrified as the full picture emerged. Catherine, did you confiscate a child's medical support item? It was against the rules, Catherine insisted, though her certainty seemed to waver as she registered the sea of disapproving faces surrounding her. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. I was on your tour. You were unnecessarily harsh with him even before that. He was just excited about dinosaurs. And he was right about the velociraptors, added an elderly man, also from the tour group. I'm a retired biology teacher. Everything that boy said was scientifically accurate. More witnesses emerged, each with their own observations of Catherine's behavior and Noah's innocent enthusiasm. The tide of public opinion was turning into a wave, and Catherine found herself increasingly isolated as even the officers began to reassess the situation. Dr. Sandoval seized the moment. I'd like to file a formal complaint about the treatment of a disabled child at this institution, and I believe these officers should consider whether a false police report was filed. Linda Parsons, recognizing both the moral and public relations disaster unfolding on her museum steps, stepped forward decisively. On behalf of the National History Museum, I want to extend our deepest apologies to the Matthews family. This incident does not reflect our values or policies regarding accessibility and inclusion. I assure you, there will be a full investigation. Catherine blanched. You can't be serious. I was following protocol for disturbances, which clearly needs revision. Linda cut her off sharply. We'll discuss this inside. Catherine, now. As Catherine was led back into the museum, The lead officer approached the Matthews family. "Sir, ma'am, I apologize for the misunderstanding. No charges will be filed. Would you like to make a report about this incident from your perspective?" Michael nodded firmly. "Yes, we would. But first, we need to get Noah somewhere calm." "Doctor," Sandoval offered her card. "My office at the Children's Hospital is just 3 blocks from here. You're welcome to use our sensory room until Noah feels better." As the Matthews family prepared to leave with Dr. Sandoval, a young museum employee hurried down the steps, clutching Noah's fallen sneaker and his pterodactyl backpack. "He left these inside," the young man said, handing them to Rachel. "And, I just wanted to say, I'm really sorry this happened." Noah seemed like he knows more about dinosaurs than most of our guides. The small kindness, after so much callousness, brought fresh tears to Rachel's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Word of the incident spread quickly through social media. By that evening, shaky cell phone videos of Noah being carried out by police were circulating online, alongside footage of Dr. Sandoval's intervention and witness accounts of Catherine's behavior. The hashtag #Justice for Noah began trending as outrage built over the treatment of an autistic child whose only crime had been enthusiasm for paleontology. 3 days later, the steps of the National History Museum were once again crowded, but this time with hundreds of protesters. Families with neurodivergent children stood alongside disability rights advocates, educators, and concerned citizens. Many carried signs, "Autism is not a crime. Museums are for everyone. Knowledge has no neurotype." The protest had been organized by Dr. Sandoval in collaboration with local autism advocacy groups. At the center stood the Matthews family Noah, looking both overwhelmed and amazed by the support, clutching a new stress ball shaped like a stegosaurus. Dr. Sandoval stepped up to the microphone that had been set up at the base of the steps. "We are here today, not only to support Noah Matthews and his family, but to demand institutional change. Public spaces, especially educational ones like museums, must be truly accessible to all minds and bodies." The crowd cheered as she continued, "Neurodiversity is not a disruption to be controlled. It's a valuable perspective to be embraced. Noah's enthusiasm for paleontology wasn't a disturbance. It was precisely the kind of passion museums should celebrate." Various speakers followed, including disability rights attorneys, educators specializing in neurodivergent learning styles, and parents sharing similar experiences. Michael Matthews spoke briefly, his voice steady with purpose rather than anger. "We don't want pity. We want change. Noah deserves to access education and culture without fear. All disabled children do." As the speeches continued, the museum's main doors opened. Linda Parsons emerged, accompanied by an older man in an expensive suit, the museum's director, Dr. Thomas Hargrove. They approached the microphone with the careful deference of institutional representatives facing a public relations crisis. Dr. Hargrove cleared his throat. "On behalf of the National History Museum's Board of Directors, I want to extend our profound apologies to Noah Matthews and his family. What happened here was inexcusable and contradicts everything our institution stands for." He paused, seeming to go off script. "Personally, as someone who has dedicated his life to educational outreach, I am deeply ashamed that a child with a passion for science was made to feel unwelcome in these halls." Linda stepped forward. "We want to announce several immediate changes. First, Catherine Wellington's employment with the museum has been terminated. Second, we are implementing mandatory training on neurodiversity and disability rights for all staff members. Dr. Hargrove continued. Additionally, we are establishing a neurodiversity advisory board to help us create truly inclusive programming and spaces. We would like to invite Dr. Sandoval to join this board, along with self-advocates from the autism community. The announcements were met with cautious applause. Dr. Sandoval nodded her acknowledgement, but spoke firmly. These are positive first steps, but institutional change requires ongoing commitment, not just crisis response. Linda nodded. We agree, which is why we have one more announcement. She turned toward the Matthews family. Noah, we understand you didn't get to finish your visit to our dinosaur exhibition. We would be honored if you would consider becoming our first junior paleontologist consultant to help us improve our exhibits and educational materials. Noah, who had been leaning against his father's side, straightened in surprise. Me really? Dr. Hargrove knelt to Noah's level, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Really, our head paleontologist tells me that many of our displays could use updating to reflect current scientific understanding. From what I hear, you might know more than some of our staff about certain aspects of dinosaur biology. For the first time since the incident, Noah's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Like the feathers on the velociraptors. Exactly like that. Dr. Hargrove confirmed with a smile. Michael and Rachel exchanged looks of cautious optimism. That's very generous, Michael said. But we'd need assurances about how Noah would be treated. Of course, Linda agreed quickly. The advisory board would establish clear protocols, and Noah would always be accompanied by you or another trusted adult. His comfort and dignity would be our priority. Rachel addressed the larger issue. And what about other neurodivergent visitors? How will you ensure this doesn't happen again? Dr. Hargrove straightened. Beyond the training and advisory board, we're redesigning our spaces to include clear sensory maps, additional quiet rooms, and sensory kits available for checkout. We're also revising all policies regarding accessibility and accommodation. Dr. Sandoval stepped forward. These changes sound promising, but the neurodivergent community has heard promises before. What's needed is ongoing accountability. We welcome that accountability, Linda responded. In fact, we're proposing quarterly public reviews of our progress, with reports developed in collaboration with disability advocacy organizations. As the conversation continued, evolving from confrontation to cautious collaboration, Noah tugged at his father's sleeve. When Michael bent down, Noah whispered something in his ear. Michael smiled and nodded encouragingly. Noah stepped forward, his fingers working his new stress ball. Dr. Hargrove respectfully lowered the microphone. I have a question, Noah said, his voice small but clear. Would I be allowed to bring my stress ball when I visit? It helps me think better. The simplicity and poignancy of the question after all the grand institutional promises struck the crowd silent. Here was the heart of the matter, a child simply wanting to exist comfortably in a public space. Dr. Hargrove's expression softened. Absolutely. Noah, your stress ball, headphones, or anything else that helps you enjoy the museum comfortably is not just allowed, but welcomed. The exchange, captured on dozens of phones, would later become one of the most shared moments from the protest, a simple human connection cutting through institutional jargon. Over the following weeks, the story continued to unfold. Catherine Wellington issued a public apology after undergoing sensitivity training, though she did not return to the museum. The police department announced revised protocols for responding to calls involving potentially disabled individuals, with training led by Dr. Sandoval's team. Noah's first official visit as junior paleontologist consultant came a month after the incident. He arrived clutching his dinosaur stress ball and a notebook filled with carefully printed facts and questions. The museum staff, many wearing newly implemented badges indicating training and accessibility support, welcomed him warmly. As Noah confidently explained to the head paleontologist why the velociraptor display needed updating, Rachel stood back, watching her son flourish in an environment that had adapted to meet him rather than demanding he change himself. "He's in his element," Michael observed quietly, slipping his arm around his wife's waist. Rachel nodded, blinking back tears. This is what inclusion actually looks like. Near the entrance to the dinosaur hall, a new display had been installed. It featured a simple, elegant plaque that read, "The National History Museum celebrates the diverse minds that study, preserve, and cherish our planet's history. All ways of learning and experiencing our exhibits are welcome here." Below the text was an illustration of a child looking up in wonder at a dinosaur skeleton, stars of excitement twinkling around them. Dr. Sandoval, visiting to observe the museum's progress, smiled as she read the plaque. Real change would require ongoing effort and vigilance. She knew. Institutions rarely transformed overnight. But watching Noah enthusiastically explaining pterosaur wing structures to an attentive museum docent, she allowed herself a moment of optimism. Sometimes it took a small voice and a community willing to amplify it to begin the long work of making the world a little more accommodating for minds of all kinds. 6 months later, the museum unveiled its new sensory-friendly dinosaurs program, developed with Noah's consultation. Special evening events featured adjusted lighting, reduced crowds, and interactive stations designed for multiple learning styles. The first such event sold out within hours. As for Noah, his experience had transformed him too. While still sometimes overwhelmed by sensory challenges, he had discovered a new confidence in his voice and his knowledge. His bedroom wall now featured a framed photo of him standing beside the museum's T-Rex skeleton, proudly wearing his official Junior Paleontologist Consultant badge. When asked by a local reporter what he had learned from the experience, Noah considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness before answering. Dinosaurs didn't survive because they were the biggest or the strongest. They survived because they could adapt. People are still learning how to adapt to different kinds of minds, but we're getting better at it. Out of the mouth of a 7-year-old came wisdom that institutions and individuals alike were still struggling to fully embrace that adaptation. Not force was the true path to evolution, whether for ancient reptiles or modern human systems. And in the halls of the National History Museum, where ancient bones told stories of Earth's past, a new story was being written, one of a community learning, slowly but surely, to make space for minds of all kinds to explore, discover, and belong.